Moderate senators agreeing with President Biden on an infrastructure package, and then you've got progressives like Senator Bernie Sanders saying we want a whole lot more, maybe as much as $6 trillion. With that, let's bring in our panel. Mollie Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, Harold Ford Jr., former Tennessee congressman and CEO of Empowerment and Inclusion Capital, and Jason Riley, Wall Street Journal columnist and senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. He is also the author of a new book, Maverick, a biography of Thomas Sowell. Panel, welcome.
Great to be here.
So, Congressman Harold Ford Jr., what do we have going on the Democratic side of things? Are they trying to keep the progressives in check while they also appease the moderates? What's going on?
Well, first, thanks for having me, and congrats to Jason on the new book. I look forward to reading it. As I listen to the parties that be, from Mitch McConnell, Senator McConnell, to even Senator Sanders, it reminded me of two things: that this effort to get a bipartisan achievement around infrastructure is really a test for whether or not bipartisanship remains a part of the relevant vernacular or current vernacular in politics. I think it does and hope it does. It also signals to leaders that we don't have the luxury. Leaders in Washington, they don't have the luxury in a deeply, deeply divided country, in a country where people have lost trust and confidence in government, to just always say no. I think when you find conservatives and liberals, those on the opposite sides in each party, finding issue or having difference with a compromise or some sort of bipartisan compromise, I think that's when Americans are going to dig down and listen and hope that the Congress can move forward. Democrats are not going to be happy with all of this. Republicans clearly are not. But the country needs to redo and strengthen our infrastructure, and this gives us a huge down payment to do that over the next several years.
I asked Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell about infrastructure. Let's take a listen.
You could best be described as a tale of two press conferences. After the first one, the president walks out with a bipartisan group and blesses an infrastructure bill that many of my members are quite optimistic about. And then after all of those people depart the White House, the president goes out for the second press conference and says, unless you pass my tax bill, I won't sign the infrastructure bill. We've gone from optimism to pessimism as a result of the president's second press conference.
Mollie, how do you see it?
Well, it was a very interesting day in Washington. It starts out with this very big announcement that there had been a bipartisan agreement on infrastructure. It is worth noting that infrastructure should be one of the easiest things to get bipartisan agreement on, and the fact that it's taken this long is not a great sign. But here you had these people really operating in seemingly good faith to get together on a bipartisan bill. Then Nancy Pelosi blows it up by saying she won't allow it to go. She won't allow it to happen unless there's this massive spending package that's been a non-starter for a lot of Republicans, or even just people remotely concerned about fiscal responsibility, which there are few and far between in this town. But then President Biden gives this press conference where he says he agrees with Nancy Pelosi. It was utterly bizarre. And the press conference in general was weird. He kept on whispering weird things, like when he blamed businesses for the problem they're having with being able to hire people. He said that they need to compete with the fact that the government is taking their money to pay people not to work, and that if they want people to work, they should just pay them more. It was very odd, and I think it was disconcerting for a lot of people to say, what is going on here?
Jason, did they get something done, or is this all blow up in the hot summer?
I kind of hope it blows up, Mike. Frankly, I think that Mitch McConnell is wise to be skeptical of this. Barry Goldwater urged Republicans to offer a choice, not simply an echo. And I think the senators pushing for this are really offering an echo. They don't care about how much is being spent. They don't care whether we can really afford to pay for it. They just want to make sure that the money is spent on their priorities as well as Democratic priorities. And I think the voters deserve better than that. This is part of a much larger Biden agenda to take us back to World War II level spending, Mike. I mean, the last time I checked, we were not at war, let alone a war on the scale of what was going on 80 years ago. This is what this bill is really about, and I don't think that the American public would have split the Senate 50-50 if this is what they wanted.
Okay, to Vice President Harris going to the border tomorrow to El Paso. Let's play this clip, and I'll have you all respond.
Was it important for the White House to have her seen at the border before former President Trump has a trip there next week?
We made an assessment within our government about when it was an appropriate time for her to go to the border.
She's going where she's not really going to be seeing active crossings. I don't think they want them crossing behind her in a camera shot. Imagine you had a problem break out in Washington, D.C., and she wanted to get to the hot spot and she landed in Boston. She wouldn't be in the right spot. If she's going to do it right, and don't laugh it off. It's a serious situation. People are dying.
Harold, your thoughts?
So a couple of things. I think our foreign policy, we have to begin to look at the border as a national security challenge, as part of a broader foreign policy challenge. Now, when you approach a big reform deal, whether it's infrastructure or immigration, on either side of the aisle, you got to get two things right. Number one, the substance. And number two, the politics. I think Vice President Harris has gotten some of the substance, if not a lot of it, right with the way she's looked at the root causes. But the politics she has not gotten right. Hopefully this acts as an accelerant, her traveling to the border and visiting there, because it is a crisis at the border. But I might add, and just a moment of levity here and perhaps lightness here, if visiting the border would solve our border challenge and border immigration challenge, then we would have solved this problem a long, long time ago. President Trump visited, even Cruz and Graham and all the senators who do all this big complaining, they've all gone down and we've not solved anything. This has to be viewed as a part of a long-term solution, or should say a big solution to a long-term problem. Remember, the last time we had immigration reform in this country was 35 years ago, and that president was Ronald Reagan.
Yep.
A lot has changed, a lot has gotten worse, and we're going to need a big package to get it right.
So the Vice President is going to El Paso. She's not going to the Rio Grande Valley or to the holding facility in Donna, Texas. Mollie, your thoughts?
That's exactly right. It is good to go to the border. It's good that she was finally pressured into going to the border because President Trump is visiting. But it's not sufficient to go down there, have a laugh, and keep things going the same way that they are. It'd be better if she visited Fort Bliss, one of these contractor facilities where 2,000 teenagers are being held, where there are lice outbreaks and strep and flu and COVID-19, and the food is substandard, where she actually saw the pain caused by the policies of the Biden administration. And what's happening is because of the Biden administration, a series of executive orders, a decision not to turn anyone away, and even now welcoming people, not just unaccompanied minors, but single people, families, and making a visit to a place where there's not much of a problem isn't going to do anything. You need to actually have her understand the problem, the pain, and all of the problems caused by having an open, porous border, or else it's not worth a trip at all.
Jason, do you see a policy change coming soon?
I'm not so sure. I think this is more about optics. I see this as part of what was going on earlier this week with the administration's sudden discovery that we have a violent crime problem in many of our big cities. This president came in and thought he would just do the opposite of everything Donald Trump was doing. So if Trump had played up violent crime, he'd play it down. If Trump played up a border problem, he would play it down. But these are real problems. And now he's suddenly realizing that and that he has to do something about them. So I think they're playing catch up here.
All right, to the voting rights bill, I asked Senator McConnell about that. Let's take a listen.
If the president wants to keep on talking about it, we'd like to keep on talking about it too, because there's no voter suppression going on in any state in America. And the bill they were trying to pass would have taxpayer dollars spent on political campaigns, would turn the Federal Election Commission from a judge into a prosecutor, in other words, make it unbalanced, and prevent photo ID at the polls, something supported by 80% of Americans. So if the president wants to keep on talking about this bill, so do we.
All right, we got less than a minute left. Let's see if we can go around the horn real fast. Harold, your thoughts?
Look, we had the biggest turnout. We had the least problems ever in a federal election. Why we would make any changes? These states are making changes, and the federal government's trying to correct or trying to prevent those changes from hurting voter turnout. It's unfortunate, and hopefully they figure this thing out.
Mollie?
It is not true that this was an election without problems. And in fact, as people have moved to mail-in balloting, people need to have confidence that it's not just that people are free to vote, but that also it's difficult to cheat. And so this is a very salient issue. And Republicans are finding that despite all of the propaganda press in favor of Democrats' plan, it's not very popular with the people. And so they're happy to keep talking about it because they know that the voters really do appreciate basic election integrity measures such as voter ID.
Jason, final thought from you.
There is no voting rights problem in this country. There was record turnout among Asians and Hispanics in 2020. Among blacks, it was the third highest turnout after 2008 and 2012, and of course Barack Obama was on the ballot. This is not about voting rights. This is a power grab from the federal government.
All right, we need to leave it there.